Today has been a fantastic day because just hours ago, Russia's generals were forced to abandon their very own headquarters due to incoming Ukrainian drones. In fact, Ukrainian drones were sent to attack the Southern Military District headquarters in Rostov-on-Don. That's located just 60 kilometers, about 37 miles, from the Ukrainian border. This is the very command center for every Russian missile strike, every ground assault that is carried out in southern Ukraine. It controls the war for Crimea, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donbass. That single blow, though, wasn't just by itself. It was part of something bigger, because then we saw a chain reaction of explosions across the Russian state. Now, with these waves of drone strikes across Russia, the situation in the country has become panicked. Moscow is being forced to defend in every direction all at once. And the best part? It got even worse. My name is Jason Smart. I'm a special correspondent for the Kiev Post here in Kiev, Ukraine. And what we see within Russia today is actually incredible. So look at Belgorod, for instance. Explosions tore through the government offices. The regional administrative building was also hit. And the governor there, Gladkov, has warned the residents that what they are facing is, quote, what they have never experienced in modern history, end quote. All of these are bright and clear signs for everybody that Ukraine can strike anywhere and at any time. Now, as we've discussed before, the incredible part is that you will never see this in the Western press, which is why I created this channel, to tell the truth about what's happening inside of Russia and the truth about what is really happening here on the ground in Ukraine. So as you are aware, there's negotiations now beginning about Ukraine's future. So please, during this vital time, help me get the truth to more people. Please like this video, please subscribe to this channel, and consider becoming a channel member today. Incredibly, we've gained over 190,000 subscribers in less than 3 months, and I would appreciate your help in reaching 200,000. So let's look at what's going on. Ukraine's reach now is simply unmatched. Drones are striking 1,700 kilometers, over 1,000 miles, deep inside of Russia. Russia is now forced to protect key hubs, which means that they have to pull off air defense from the front. They have to pull troops off of the front. So every redeployed gun leaves a trench a little bit weaker. And that vulnerability opens the door for Ukraine's next phase: dismantling the fuel that powers the Russian war. Today, Ukraine struck yet another major Russian oil refinery, and that attack forced all production to halt. Fires burnt so brightly that they were visible from dozens of kilometers away. And it was just one part, though, of a national campaign. A campaign that targets Russia's ability to fuel its war. It is going to seek to dismantle Russia's command, Russia's fuel, and Russia's logistics network, all of which are located inside of Russia. Now, you remember just a little while ago, on August 2nd, Ukraine hit the Rostov-on-Don refinery in Russia. That was the third largest refining complex in Russia. And output dropped by more than 50% overnight. Rostov-on-Don had been processing 13 million tons of oil per year. And very importantly, it produces a critical share of Russia's aviation fuel. Now, Ukraine has struck other facilities, as you've seen in the past couple months, including the one in Volgograd, owned by LUKOIL. That alone produced 6% of Russia's crude. That's amazing. 6% just knocked off overnight by a drone that's worth a few $100. It is absolutely incredible. Now, since 2024, Ukraine has hit at least 61 different refineries, depots, pumping stations, and just now they've also struck in Bryansk, Russia, the Druzhba pipeline. That disrupted the exports to Hungary and Slovakia. So Ukraine has been strategically targeting throughout Russia the pipeline control stations, the airfield fuel reserves, the coastal export terminals, and it's all just a clear sign that Ukraine is not just seeking here to inflict some damage to hurt the industry, it is seeking to collapse the industry. It is engineering the failure of Russia's oil exports. And the economic toll is, in fact, devastating. Russia has lost up to 17% of its refining capacity. it has lost 20% of its seaborne oil exports. And this is why the strategy is working so well, because it's attacking the Kremlin on 3 fronts at once. It's going for the command hubs and the very decision centers where this war is being planned. By crippling them, Russia is set back further. By attacking the fuel production, the distribution, it's going to limit Russia's ability to supply its tanks, its aircrafts, and its convoys. But also, by attacking the export infrastructure, this cuts off Russia's access to hard currency, and specifically that currency that finances this war. Every one of these attacks has another great benefit, is that it forces the Kremlin into impossible trade-offs. Either it can defend its refineries, or it can defend its front lines. It can repair the pipelines, or it can fix some of the destroyed aircraft. It can protect the export terminals, or reinforce the occupied territories. So Ukraine isn't just hitting targets. Ukraine is cutting the arteries of Russia's war machine. But look at within Belgorod. That was once considered to be a very secure logistics hub. But now, the Russian city of Belgorod has become a frontline city. And what's amazing about it is that Russian soldiers are being sent there to guard the intersections, which means that there's less Russian soldiers in the trenches. Again, Vladimir Putin is being given a very difficult choice. Does he protect his trenches or protect the command posts or the refineries? He cannot do both. So while Russia is in a much more complicated situation, they finally, after months, have left the very static position they had in Donetsk and tried to advance. Russian forces, in fact, successfully pushed 18 kilometers, which is 11 miles, into Donetsk. But this did not come easy for the Russians. This came at a tremendous cost. In fact, if you look at the videos, it looks like they have lost a substantial number of soldiers with this attempt. But ultimately, it seems that Ukraine has got the situation there under control. Ukraine, though, has a strategy to what it's doing. And that's why I think that most people look at something like this advance. Of course, it's not a good sign, but it's not the end of the world. Ukraine has got a strategy, which is to trade ground, to give it time, to destroy Russian manpower and equipment. Because if Russia ultimately breaches the Dobropilya line, Pavlograd will become the next defensive hub. Moscow will pay a crippling cost, though, to get there. It's pretty clear at this point that Russia simply doesn't have the capacity to get much further. And it is now burning through everything it has left with soldiers and equipment because it seems that it wants to make advances before the peace talks. What we see, though, is something else that's very important, is that this war is draining Russia not just on the fronts, but also back at home. Just look at how much Russian industry has collapsed due to this war. In St. Petersburg, the brand new Captain Ushakov, which is a naval tugboat, well, guess what? It sank at dock before it even entered service. You probably just saw a couple weeks ago that the Admiral Kuznetsov, which is the last remaining carrier for the Russian Navy, well, guess what? That floating monument to decay is going to be sent for scrap metal. Things are just not good for Russia. They have a very difficult situation. They have no ability to be able to continue this war. Economically, they're running out of options. Russia's budget deficit is about 61 billion US dollars. That's about 2.2% of GDP. It's 25% already above the full year target. Now, check out these numbers because this is actually incredible. Government spending is up by 21%. However, inflation is about 10%. That means that the real increase in spending power is closer to 10%. But revenues are only up 3%, which means they're actually down about 7% when you control for inflation. So Moscow is getting less value for every ruble that it spends. And the deficit is growing in the real terms, not just on the paper. This is the point, is that Russia can print money, but it cannot achieve what it wants to. Its own domestic problems, its own domestic economic issues will not allow it to continue waging war. Oil and gas revenues, which make up about 40% of the Russian federal budget, they fell by 27% in July alone. That's amazing. Just from January to July, the drop is roughly 20%. Russia has cut off its oil, or it's losing its ability to export oil, which is going to further damage their economy. Russia's cut its 2025 oil and gas export revenues in their most recent revised forecast by 15%. That means it's about 200 billion US dollars of cuts. This is a direct hit on Russia's ability to finance the war. But there's another aspect of this as well, which is simply that Urals crude, which is the oil that typically comes from Russia, is trading far cheaper than what the Russian government had anticipated. It's about 30% below what the price they used when they established the 2025 federal budget in Russia. So this deficit, this gap, it's a lot of money. It's about $13 billion. Well, now, what's interesting about that is, consider this. Spending in Russia for the military is about 6% of GDP, which is the highest amount it's been since the Cold War. But that's 40% of all federal spending. Now, if you consider that they've got this incredibly high spending on the military, and they have money that's got very little value, and there's less people buying their oil, how can they afford to continue fighting this war? Where will they get the money to finance this war? And the answer is, there is no money. They have no ability to finance this war. They will most likely begin to devalue their currency or to print more money. And in neither case is things going to work out well for Russia. That will only make things far, far worse. But today, when we look at the situation of what's happening, what's really occurring, Ukraine is expanding the battlefield. And now it is expanded across the entirety of Russia. Ukraine is now going for targets like the Rostov headquarters. That's showing the entire population of Russia how weak their government really has become. What a lack of ability they have to even defend their most critical parts of their security infrastructure. Vladimir Putin is in an incredibly challenging situation. And despite the fact that the Western press treats him as if he's perhaps, yes, as a dictator, but also as a strongman, nothing can be further from the truth. He's incredibly weak, as is Russia as a whole. The Russian state today cannot continue to wage war. And in fact, every day, things get better for Ukraine. Because Ukraine is not going to fight this war, a war of attrition, as Russia would want. It's going to continue to fight the war inside of Russia, to bring the war to the Russians, and to force the Russians out of Ukraine. Thank you for watching. Please like this video. Please subscribe to the channel. Share this video with others. And leave your comments below. What do you think? Should Ukraine strike within Russia? Thank you, as always, for supporting Ukraine.